We can look at the aspect that there are times when we want a certain thing to change and then we don't want certain thing to change. So imagine this: on the x-axis, we have on one side want certain things to change, and then the other side would be do not want certain things to change. And imagine on the y-axis, those changes happen or those changes don't happen. So you get four quadrants. Want change happens, want change does not happen, don't want change happens, don't want change doesn't happen. And then we progress from this over a period of time. Obviously, we do not keep account of these quadrants and what happens, and hence we get overwhelmed by the way we have our own functions going, our choices to be made, our actions to be made, given the context and our states that we are in. Another way to look at change would be this aspect that at the level of biology, human biology, at the level of nature itself, at the level of cosmology, there are some changes that happen consistently over a period of time. The solar system would move, the planets would orbit, the atoms are doing the job, or electrons are doing the work. The fundamental interactions mentioned in physics are happening. So those changes are changes that are happening irrespective. And then we have this element of where humans want to intervene through their actions and bring about certain things. Now, this bringing about certain things could be any of the biology, nature, cosmology is such that it is serving certain goals for the human being and or the tribe and or humanity in general. And this certain changes and certain actions are being brought about by influencing people, rallying people, inspiring people in a certain direction. And such things are brought about by various means. So imagine those means are in some way, let's say there are some things that are changed, but the impact of the change, the span of this change is higher. Now, what do you mean by span? The span could mean number of people who get affected by those choices and actions, and then the duration for which this effect remains. So imagine on the x-axis we plot the number of people getting impacted, and y-axis is the duration. Duration here could also mean that when you apply this particular change, this particular element that is being changed is then in some way enforced or is required to be enforced over multiple times, over multiple events, or over multiple incidences or context. So, for example, in the longer duration states, you'll find policies made by governments are something that will have a very high span and a high duration, because those have impact over many number of people, and it lasts so beyond just one incidence of implementing it. So we could then have plotting where we have high impact, number of people impacted, high duration, low impact, low duration, high impact, low duration, and low impact and high duration. So then there is this another angle that we could bring in terms of our awareness, which is if we look around and let's say if I actually, let me do this. We had run a small experiment in a workshop that we had done. And in the workshop, we asked people to just write down, bring to their awareness. So we ran some meditation, and then after the meditation, they were requested to bring to their memory people around them that they have more frequent interactions with. And then we asked them things that they find extremely awkward when they have these interactions. And they should just mention those awkwardnesses. And then what could be the potential solution such that this awkwardness is not brought about. So we got people write down the awkwardness statements, and we also got them write. Incidentally, and more interestingly, most of them wrote what that person needs to change in order that this awkwardness is not brought about to them. Then we asked another question. Now let's look at what different people are telling you to change in you. Can we just make a list of what are the changes that people are asking you to make in your being and becoming and behavior? So people wrote that list. And then we asked them to put all of this in on a single wall, and then asked them to go through all of these at a single stretch. We got them to sit down again ran a meditation, and then asked them what came up for them when they did this exercise. So a lot of people said a lot of things, but some of the salient ones were, it is overwhelming to see that so much of change is required. It is overwhelming to see how a single person can actually run 20, 30, 40 change projects in the person's behavior, in the person's belief, in the person's becoming at the same time. And we had a long conversation around it, and it's a part of our workshop that we can do. But another thing that led from this was, we went a little more meditating into, so do people really change, or how do people navigate these many change projects that we have of each other? So some other insights emerged, that indeed it is the case that obviously you cannot take up everybody's change requests or change commands or instructions at the same time. But some people definitely take up some of the instructions or stuff seriously, and they embark on this change project. Another interesting thing happened, which is, while the change is being implemented, the person is obviously going through a lot of challenges. Sometimes it becomes easy, sometimes it's easy and replicable, sometimes it's difficult and replicable, sometimes it's easy and not replicable, and sometimes it is difficult and not replicable. By replicable, I mean the ability to do it over and over again, or it actually happens over and over again. So you again get four quadrants: easy, difficult on x-axis, and y-axis you have replicable, not replicable. And then, because you're again interacting with those people, remember we mentioned that these are frequent interactions, the person is pointing out to the instances of things that are not changed. So a lot of emphasis, or our hardware, the processing, the brain processing, is towards finding what is not working, or what is salient in terms of the negative functions. And I'm just using the word negative here as a placeholder. We'll get that to it in another voice note. So this is another aspect of change, that when people embark on their change behavior, sometimes it's just not, it is the case that it's not implemented all the time. And then what happens to the times that it is not implemented and seen by the other who's requested you to change? And then how does this person interact? What happens to the inventory of the times that those things have been actually implemented? I believe that there are nuances to it, in the sense, human capacity, all of us have this capacity that we need to be aware of, and we need to tune them up. We need to become aware of our thinking, our feeling, our speech, our action, and at the same time seeing that in the other. Because it could well be the case that the other person is trying and we are not seeing it, or we are only seeing the aspects or instances where that thing is not being done. So how do we deal with it? That's another question that we will get into some other day. But these are some of the rabbit holes that need to be looked at. Another double click here would be, so, going back to the example we were sharing, that, everybody's got so many change projects for the other, and then so many others have change projects for you. And then as you're implementing only a few of them, some part of the time, because you're also under the pressure of things that you have to perform, there are other duties and roles and responsibilities that you are also living as this is going on. The thing of change fatigue comes in. Sometimes too many people are asking too many change requests in you, or you are asking it in others. So what happens when there is too much of change demand happening with each other? In what ways do we feel connected with the other? In what ways do we start disconnecting with the other because of the change fatigue or overdrive of change in some sense?